3,500 years ago, a pharaoh planted a flower, not for food, not for medicine, not for anything as ordinary as that. He planted it because he believed it carried the power of gods.
A pharaoh planting a flower?
That flower is growing in a pot on someone's windowsill right now. It is sitting in buckets outside florists on every high street. People buy it for Mother's Day without a second thought. But what they are holding, what they have always been holding, is one of the most sacred and storied plants in the entire history of human civilization.
What flower are we talking about?
The iris. And once you know its story, you will never look at it the same way again. The year was 1469 BC. The pharaoh was Thutmose III, one of the most powerful rulers ancient Egypt ever produced. A military genius, an empire builder, a man who expanded Egyptian territory further than any pharaoh before him. He had campaigned through Syria, through Mesopotamia, through lands that most Egyptians would never see in their lifetimes. And from those campaigns, among the spoils and the tribute and the conquered territories, he brought something back that would outlast every battle he ever won.
He brought back a flower.
He brought back the iris, and he planted it in the royal gardens at Karnak. Gardens so important that he had the plants he collected carved into the walls of the temple itself, the botanical garden of Thutmose III. Stone reliefs showing the plants he had gathered from across the known world, preserved in rock for 3,500 years.
He carved them into the temple walls. He thought they were important enough to carve into stone.
He did. And the iris was not simply a garden ornament in ancient Egypt. It occupied a position of profound symbolic significance. The three petals of the iris, that distinctive tripartite blossom that makes the flower immediately recognizable, were believed to represent three of the most important qualities a human being could possess: faith, wisdom, valor. Three petals, three virtues, in a single flower.
Faith, wisdom, and valor. All three, in one bloom.
The Egyptians associated the iris with the renewal of life itself, with the essence of what it meant to exist, to endure, to begin again. And so it appeared everywhere that power and eternity intersected. It decorated the scepters of pharaohs, the very instruments of royal authority. It was painted on the walls of palaces and tombs, where it would accompany the dead into whatever came next. And perhaps most extraordinarily of all, it was placed on the brow of the Sphinx.
On the brow of the Sphinx?
The great stone guardian that has watched over the Egyptian desert for 4,500 years. At some point in antiquity, someone placed an iris there, a flower of faith, wisdom, and valor, on the face of the most enduring monument the ancient world ever made.
So the Egyptians were not just growing it, they were using it to say something about power, about permanence, about what mattered.
Exactly. The iris in ancient Egypt was a living symbol, a flower that encoded an entire philosophy into its three petals. And it was through Egypt, through those trading routes and cultural exchanges that connected the ancient Mediterranean world, that the iris began its journey into another civilization, one that would give it a name that has lasted to this day.
Greece.
Ancient Greece, a world where the natural and the divine were not separate categories, where a flower could be a goddess made visible, where the sky itself was a living being with intentions and messages for the mortals below. And in that world, a goddess moved between heaven and earth along a bridge of living color.
The rainbow.
Her name was Iris. She was the messenger of the gods, the living link between the divine world of Olympus and the mortal world below. When Zeus needed to communicate with humanity, when Hera needed a trusted intermediary, it was Iris who carried the message. She moved along the rainbow as her road, descending from the heavens to earth and returning again. The arc of color, her path between two worlds.
So the rainbow was not just weather. It was a goddess in transit.
In the Greek imagination, yes. And wherever her rainbow touched the ground, flowers were said to spring up in her wake. Not just any flowers. These flowers, the ones the Greeks named for her, Iris, the flower of the rainbow goddess, the plant that bloomed wherever the divine touched the earth.
Wherever the divine touched the earth. That is an extraordinary thing to believe about a flower.
It is. And it tells you something important about how the ancient Greeks saw the natural world, not as a backdrop to human life, but as a living text, full of messages, full of meaning, full of the presence of forces greater than humanity. The iris was not just a beautiful flower, it was evidence that the gods had been there.
And that they were still communicating.
The goddess Iris carried messages in both directions, from the gods to mortals,
and in one of the most profound beliefs connected to this flower, from the living to the dead.
What do you mean?
In ancient Greece, when a woman died, purple irises were planted on her grave, not as decoration, not simply as a mark of mourning, but as a summons, a deliberate act of communication with the divine. The irises called to the goddess. They asked her to come, to find this soul, to escort her along that rainbow road from the world of the living to whatever lay beyond.
So the flower was a bridge between the living and the dead?
Between this world and the next. The same flower that decorated the scepters of pharaohs and the brow of the Sphinx was also the flower that Greek women planted in grief, in hope, in the belief that beauty could reach across the boundary between life and death and bring a goddess down to walk beside the departed.
I had no idea a flower could carry that much meaning.
Most flowers do, if you know where to look, and the iris carries more than most, because its story does not stay in the realm of the divine. It comes down to earth, into the hands of healers and physicians, and the practical, careful observers who documented what the natural world could actually do.
Dioscorides again.
The same physician who documented yarrow in his 5 volumes of De Materia Medica also turned his careful attention to the iris. But he was not alone. The Greek botanist Theophrastus documented the iris root centuries before him. Between them, these two men established the iris not only as a flower of myth and symbol, but as a plant of genuine and documented medical power.
What did they find it could do?
The fresh root of the iris is remarkable. When it is chewed, it produces a pungent, acrid taste that lingers in the mouth for hours. That acridity is the signature of a powerful active compound, one that gives the fresh root strong purgative and diuretic properties. Ancient physicians used it to treat dropsy, the dangerous accumulation of fluid in the body, and believed that if the condition could be cured by any plant, the iris root would do it.
So the root is not gentle, it is powerful.
Powerfully so. In large doses, the fresh root will occasion nausea, vomiting, purging, and colic. It demanded respect and careful use. But in the hands of a skilled physician, it was one of the most effective tools available. And the dried root told a completely different story.
Different how?
When the iris rhizome, the thick creeping root, is dried, something extraordinary happens. The acridity almost entirely disappears. The sharp, punishing taste fades, and what replaces it is something subtle, complex, and beautiful. The dried root was used for coughs, for hoarseness, for complaints of the lungs. Medieval physicians prescribed it for bronchitis and chronic diarrhea. Pieces of the dried root were chewed to overcome an unpleasant breath, one of the earliest breath fresheners in the recorded world. And powdered dried root used as a snuff was documented as an effective remedy for congested headaches, its fine particles exciting a sneezing reflex that relieved a pressure.
So the iris root was a purgative, a cough remedy, a breath freshener, and a headache treatment. That is a remarkable range for a single plant.
And we have not even reached the most extraordinary thing the iris root can do, because when you dry an iris rhizome and leave it, not for days or weeks, but for years, something begins to happen deep inside the root that no one fully understands even now.
How long?
3 years. You must wait 3 years. The fresh rhizome is practically odorless, but as it dries and as time passes, a compound called irone begins to develop slowly inside the root, and irone, this patient, time-born molecule, smells of violets, clean, deep, complex, ancient, one of the most beautiful natural scents in the world, developing in the dark over 3 long years inside a dried root.
3 years in a dried root, and then it smells of violets.
The Egyptians knew this. The Greeks knew this. Macedonia, Elis, and Corinth were famous in the ancient world for their unguents of iris, perfumed preparations made from this violet-scented root that were traded across the Mediterranean. In ancient Rome, orris root, as the dried iris rhizome came to be known, was one of the most prized perfume ingredients in existence.
And then it reached Tuscany.
In the hills between Florence and Siena, on the mountain slopes of Tuscany, something remarkable was happening. Whole districts given over entirely to the cultivation of iris plants. Families of peasants working the land together, moving barefoot through the rows, carefully weeding, tending, waiting. The iris takes 2 years to establish itself, 3 years to reach full maturity. In the 3rd year, it grows almost to the height of a man. The flowers bloom in May and June in extraordinary beauty, and then in July they fade, and the harvest begins.
Whole hillsides, whole families, 3 years of waiting.
A good harvest at a single large plantation could yield 1 million kilograms of fresh roots.
After peeling and drying, roughly 300 tons of orris root, shipped from Leghorn and Trieste in large casks to perfumers across Europe. The finest was Florentine orris, carefully peeled, almost white, extraordinarily fragrant. The violet scent of 3 years concentrated into a dried root the size of a fist.
And this is still in use today?
Orris root is still one of the most important fixatives in modern perfumery, a substance that strengthens and extends other scents, making a perfume last longer on the skin. But the story of orris and violet perfume has a twist that changes everything you think you know about the scent of violets.
What kind of twist?
In 1893, a chemist named Tiemann, working from his research on iron, the violet-scenting compound in orris root, succeeded in synthesizing an artificial version. He called it ionone. It smelled even more intensely of violets than the natural iron itself, and it could be manufactured at a fraction of the cost, 1/8 of the price of natural violet oil.
So most violet perfume is not actually violet?
Most of the cheaper violet perfumes on the market contain no trace of true violet at all. They are made entirely with synthetic ionone, a compound derived from the scientific study of an iris root. The violet perfume industry, worth millions, was born from a dried root on a Tuscan hillside and a chemist who understood what 3 years of patient chemistry could produce.
The iris root changed the perfume world.
It changed everything it touched. And the iris was not finished with the world of power and symbol, because from those same Mediterranean landscapes where it had decorated the scepters of Egyptian pharaohs and given its name to a Greek goddess, the iris made its way into medieval Europe and onto the banners of kings.
The fleur-de-lis.
The fleur-de-lis, the stylized iris that became the emblem of French royalty, the flower on the banners and shields and crowns of the most powerful monarchy in medieval Europe. The exact same tripartite form, 3 petals, 3 virtues, faith, wisdom and valor, that Thutmose III had encoded in stone 3,000 years earlier, now flew on the flags of the French crown. The ancient arms of Florence showed a white iris on a red shield. The iris had become the symbol not of a single pharaoh, but of entire dynasties.
The same 3 petals, the same 3 virtues, from Thutmose III to the kings of France. 3,000 years of unbroken symbolic power.
No other flower has moved through so many civilizations, so many belief systems, so many expressions of human meaning, and carried the same essential idea through all of them. The iris has always meant the same thing: power, divinity, the connection between what is mortal and what is eternal, and the extraordinary, patient beauty of something that reveals its deepest gift only after 3 years of quiet waiting.
And it is sitting in a bucket outside a florist right now.
In a bucket outside a florist, in a pot on a windowsill, in a garden border somewhere in the suburbs. The same flower that escorted Greek women to the afterlife along a rainbow road. The same flower that Thutmose III carried back from his campaigns and carved into the walls of a temple. The same flower whose roots scented the perfumes of ancient Egypt, transformed the violet perfume industry, and still works quietly in the finest fragrances in the world today. The same flower that flew on the banners of French kings.
You really do not know what you are looking at.
Until you do. And now you do. The iris has always been extraordinary. You just needed someone to tell it its name.